Hello and welcome to the show. Now, there are many great manufacturer rivalries in the automotive industry. The likes of Mustangs versus Camaros, Evos versus Imprezas. And now, thanks to Horizon 3, I can finally have a go at investigating the age-old Ford versus Holden with the HSV GTS and the Ford Falcon GTF 351. We have now got, the two most up-to-date versions of these cars and can pit them against one another. Statistically speaking, though, the Ford does seem to be at quite a disadvantage. While 471 horsepower is not exactly a small amount, the Holden has over 100 more, and likewise, the HSV has got over 120 more torque than the Falcon. Now, that is a big deficit, considering, yes, the Ford is slightly lighter. It's only 100 pounds lighter. Both these cars weighing over 4,000 pounds. That is quite a big deficit. However, the game has the cars very, very similar in PI. I think there's only about 8 PI different between the two of them, which is, quite surprising considering the power differences. Nevertheless, I set out to see how they would do, starting, of course, with a hot lapping contest around... This is just a random track that I found. I was just looking for an all-tarmac circuit to take these cars around, and it has quickly become my favourite circuit on this game. This is an absolutely stunning track made up of predominantly medium-speed corners. There's a couple of little bit nastier turns, but plenty of crests, plenty of hills to really be testing the vehicle. The Ford would set the benchmark of 54.7 around this track for the GTS to try and beat. Now, one thing I will say about both of these vehicles, in fact, they were quite a bit more controlled than I was expecting. When you've got, in the case of this HSV, you've got 570 plus horsepower going through the rear wheels of a big four-door saloon car. I expected it to be incredibly leery. However, it actually wasn't too bad to control. The power could be put down very, very nicely. It was a little bit more slidey, and certainly a couple of laps I did get some big slides with this car that kind of ruined any hope of getting a fast lap time. It does go sideways. It's very, very controllable, but you will, of course, ruin the lap time with the car. And the whole, both vehicles did impress me with their control. The Ford, though, was perhaps a little bit easier to extract performance out of. I mean, both relatively predictable, but again, the Ford a little bit better in terms of predictability, but it wasn't by much. The HSV considerably, we would expect it to be considerably faster, accelerating and so on. It does go quicker around the lap here, 54.5, but only 0.2 of a second. Now, as I said, with the power figures, we were expecting the drag race to be a complete and utter walkover for the Holden, but that was not the case at all. Despite being so far down on power and torque, somehow these Fords were really giving the GTS a run for its money as we come down the airfield. A couple of leaders obviously got a bit better starts, got slightly better gear changes perhaps, were pulling away. I was in third, trying to fend off the resurgence of the Holdens towards the end of the course. However, while it would be a GTS that would claim victory, two Falcons would make it on to the podium. No one expected it to be as close as that. No one expected it to be quite as close as that in the drag race. We really thought, that the Holdens would walk it. The Ford just makes very, very good use of the power that it has. Of course, hot lapping is one thing. It was off to see how the vehicles would fare in a racing situation, starting off in the streets of Surfers Paradise. One of the joys of Horizon 3 is there is a fair amount of bumping in racing, especially, not everyone knows the circuits as well as you would know perhaps a, traditional track in Forza 5 or 6 and so on. So, there is a little bit more in terms of touring car contact, shall we say. These things are kind of touring cars, so we will deal with that. Not the greatest of opening laps for me. Trying my best to keep out of trouble. Get a little bit of friendly fire from the Ford trying to get sneak past on the inside. I ended up, out of all of it, in third place. The two leaders going side by side around the final corner. As the race progressed, I would move up to second with a mistake from the blue car that would drop him well down the order. And the Ford was going very, very well. I was closing in on the leader, trying to find a way past this track. A good mixture, actually, of corners. You've got a very, very fast turn 1 up here. It's a nasty turn 1, followed by an increasingly tight turn 2, kind of a little bit blind on the turn in as well. The Holden gets all manner of sideways out of that second corner. I controlled the Ford that little bit better, will draw alongside and take the lead with better acceleration down towards the next corner. I then immediately run out of grip through the very fast chicane, and we've got a sequence of slow corners coming up. Just got to keep an eye on the mirror, be ready to defend. The Holden does try to get to the inside, although is on such a tight line, cannot carry any of the momentum, but we've both slowed each other down. And now the third place car, a purple HSV, has jumped up into the fray. He dives across the inside. I'm forced to take a little bit of avoiding action. I figured I might be able to maintain a bit more momentum not going through the electricity poles or whatever, but didn't quite work out for me. As we come into turn 1, both of us managed to overrun the corner a little bit. The purple car still stuck on the outside as we run through this second corner. He's now fighting with the other HSV behind them. The Falcon was busy fighting off another one of the Holdens. The purple car ending up stuck out wide of turn 2 as well, would end up in trouble. This time I make sure not to make the same mistake of clattering into the wall on the exit of the chicane, and just a few more corners to go for the Ford to fend off an onrushing pack of HSVs as we round this. It's quite a nasty tight section through here. I'm not taking any risks jumping across the curb and jumping across the grass. Thankfully for me, the cars behind started getting busy with fighting for position. That allowed me to get a nice little bit of a mudge. You can see in the rearview mirror they're almost 3 wide on the exit of that final corner. The Ford would take victory in race number 1, followed by 3 Holdens, then a couple more of the Falcons. Quite a good fun, and again, very, very evenly balanced race. And looking from the stats, this was not quite what we were expecting. And considering when you drive them, you know, the Holden isn't massively difficult to drive, or massively more difficult to drive than the Ford. However, the Ford just makes better use of, I don't know how it does it, there might be some magic involved in all of this, but the Falcon really does do a very, very good job of still being able to get good acceleration out of these turns, being able to keep up. Now, the Holdens weren't dropping it in Australia. Eventually, yeah, the superior power of the Holden, when we are starting to get up to really high speeds, the HSV will be going that little bit faster, but on most racetracks you come to, you're never going to get up to that high enough speed. This next circuit, again, I was trying to pick my way through the opening lap. A hectic race once more. Everyone battling for position, quite sideways cars everywhere. We're going 3 wide across the start-finish line. I don't really know where the best place to be going is around here. Slight little bit of pinball going on for my vehicle. Eventually, I managed to get the car back down to the inside, and this race would continue to be frantic pretty much throughout the entirety of its 6 laps, as position swapped very regularly. The leaders were lucky enough to manage to, well, break free of the chaos that you see going on. I was getting a grandstand seat for a battle between the Holden and the Ford directly ahead of me, ready to pick out the pieces, ready to go for an overtake should a good opportunity arise. There's quite a lot of smoke, ignore that, that's just the joys of Forza lag going on, and sure enough there's a little bit of bumping between the 2 cars. I had to try and sneak up the inside. I will just about get the move done as we come through this fast chicane towards the finish line, but still got a car stuck on my outside. I spent most of my race stuck with somebody alongside me at various points. Get a better line through turn 1. Do get the position on the blue Ford, only to immediately lose it. A great cutback from the blue car there to regain his 6th place. A fantastic manoeuvre to have to give the vehicle space. Up ahead, there's another 3-car battle going on for the last of the podium positions at the moment. Yeah, as soon as you get sort of drawn into battles like this, makes things considerably easier for the cars, and certainly the leaders if you can break away from a group to pull a gap. I was finally getting my opportunity. This is my favourite overtaking spot on this track, being neat through the first part. You get a quick run out of the corner to make a move stick. Unfortunately, little bits of lag would see the lead Ford dumped down the order. That's, again, something that happens when it comes to online racing. However, the Falcons were once more showing themselves to be incredibly competitive. Very little to pick between the two vehicles. Again, as I run into this second corner, cut back from the Holden, would have him on the inside. I couldn't quite get my vehicle to the right position to defend that position. Third place was having some issues, sliding the car all over the place. I was hoping maybe if I could get lucky, maybe there could be a podium for the Ford. My favourite overtaking spots coming up here. The silver car out very, very wide. I do get my car turned to the inside very nicely. I get a bit of an opportune oversteer this time around as we run up through the final corner. I throw my car across the grass, carry as much speed as I dare, but I couldn't do it. In the end, it would be a rather Holden-dominated race too, claiming the top 4 spots. But, looking at lap time-wise, I was only 0.3 of a second off the fastest lap time set in the race. Very, very close once more. Now, the tarmac races had been done, so it was time to take the cars a little bit out of their comfort zone with a scramble race. So a small dirt section to be starting this course with, starting this lap with, I should say. And then it gets to quite a narrow, quite a tricky section later on. I really like this scramble circuit. All of us completely not realising that there was a wall on the outside of that corner. Doesn't help when you're as far back as I am and there's just a sea of cars and dust going on through that corner. You really don't see much until you are already committed. Car up ahead ends up in a little bit of trouble, caught in the wall, and no one really has anywhere to go through that section. The downside, of course, of these very, very narrow streets, as the black Holden, it got spun round, got going again quite quickly though, pointing in the right direction, amazingly, despite spinning in front of half the pack. Everyone managed to avoid really well and get out of that surprisingly neatly. Up ahead of me, Holdens were busy mugging a Ford for its positions, and I was keen to not let the leaders get too far away. As we come up towards turn 1, I'm very late on the brakes, going for the brave around the outside, and the blue Ford did not want to get caught up on the inside of the bridge. Probably a wise decision in all of that, and is once more onto the dirt section. The Ford able to put its power down out on the dirt quite nicely. I spent the entirety of my race looking at the back of a HSV. I was, quick around this circuit, but I was never quite quick enough in the right places to get an overtake until the final lap. As we leave the bridge heading on to the dirt, I tried to straight line the exit of this corner as much as I could, and again, I can put the power down that little bit easier in the Ford. I get a fantastic run through the dirt section. I'm to the inside of the HSV, a little bit on 2 wheels across the curb, struggling a bit with understeer, but the HSV stuck on that outside, which was going to have to lift. I got a little bit of a bump from him as I get the pass done, although he goes for a big dive at the hairpin, and likewise it's my turn now to be the one stuck on the outside. I open up the steering, hoping I could get a good run with a little bit wider line. I was trying to find the pavement so that I could get the acceleration rather than on the grass, but it didn't quite work out in the end. Up ahead you can see the 2 leaders fighting for position. Once more it was Holden's looking out the podium, but again, looking at the lap times, the Falcons really were right there. They were really right there in terms of lap time. I've been keeping up for the entirety of the race on the most part and fighting with the cars. Finally, because I like doing rather crazy things, we decided to go for a cross-country race. So completely and utterly outside of the comfort zone for both of these cars. Not at all what they were designed for doing, but that is the joys of Horizon 3 as we barrel our way into turn 1. The purple HSV that had been on pole got in trouble out wide across the bumps and went for a pretty big spin. Again, spun in front of the whole field, kind of sort of scooted across in front of everybody, and the whole field missed him, which is, we've had quite good luck with cars doing that in this. This is completely and utterly unsuited terrain for these cars, and yeah, neither of them massively happy with this. Yeah, dealing with the bumps, they are not ideally suited. They do get thrown around quite a lot, and while yes, the Ford is that tiny bit better in terms of delivering its power, it's not by that much, and not when you're dealing with terrain like this. I was out in front and having quite a nice little bit of a margin going on at this stage, just kind of managing my own race. It was important not to do anything stupid. Very easy on a course like this to throw things away, although, again, as I said at the start, these were not as stupidly difficult to drive around here as I was expecting them to be. Even the Holdens weren't having massive issues with the car being completely uncontrollable despite nearly 600 horsepower going on. They were doing remarkably well. I was absolutely flying on this course, was keeping myself out of trouble. I think the Holden that was trying to chase me down, one of them at least, went for a little bit of a spin, trying to keep it out of the puddles. But it's been a while since I've driven down this route and couldn't quite remember where they all were. It's not just the water, though, that you have to worry about. I've got a big airtime. That airtime wasn't a problem. The bump there, though, that I didn't know about was. And sure enough, I go for a tumble. I mean, it's me driving an orange and black car. It's always going to happen. And as you can see in the rearview mirror, the Holden that was in second place joined me. Exactly the same way. Went for a tumble. That put a blue Ford up into the lead. I went the wrong side of the water here to get the check. But I was trying to stay out of the water, and yeah, didn't quite work. I did fall back into third. However, a purple Holden overshot the corner massively, carried a lot of speed through the water, but ended up out very, very wide as we bounce our way down towards the final few corners on this race. Vehicle up ahead goes for a big break. Wasn't expecting that from the Holden as we slide our way through the next corner, and this is where we see the Ford can just use that power a little bit better. Purple car actually got in all sorts of trouble, stuck out wide, and I could drive through to take a second place. Holdens would be third, fourth and fifth. Once again though, as we'd had throughout with these races, incredibly, I mean, there's a finish difference there between 6th and 7th, like a 0.2 of a second in all of this, and that's across a stupid race for these cars. Yeah, as far as conclusions go in this one, the Holden won a bit more in terms of the races it did win, the hot lapping it did also win, the drag race in general. I would say that the Holden is the fractionally, and I am talking fractionally, it does pay me to say, I'm very much a Ford person, however, the Holden does win this by a tiny bit. It is not by very much though. These two cars are incredibly similar, despite the, statistically looking at it, you would expect the Holden to run away with it. Certainly in terms of the drag race, you would expect it to, but the Ford's really kept up with it down any of the straights of the races. The Ford puts its power down that little bit better, so if it does come to certainly a cross-country race, off-road, anything with a dirt section, the Ford would probably be the car to have fractionally, but again, they are so incredibly close, these two. They are really very, very similar in terms of performance. The Ford is slightly cheaper at 60,000 credits, to the HSV 75,000 credits. So yeah, 15,000 credits less for the Ford for pretty much the same performance, almost identical performance. Perhaps the Ford a little bit better value for money, and personally, I would indeed have the Falcon. I prefer the look of it slightly over that of the HSV, and as I said, I'm a little bit of a Ford fan, but yeah, it's remarkably close between these two cars, far closer than we ever expected. However, yeah, victory is going to go by the tiniest of margins to the HSV GTS. However, that is going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.